Okay. So good morning to all people following the conference online also. And thank you very much, Jean-Luc. Okay. I have sent the paper a couple of days ago to José Mboya and Jean-Luc. So I hope you will receive the paper through email or whatever. And I was asked for this conference to offer a contribution about how the Ignatian sources can inspire our daily life as Jesuits or members of what we called yesterday also the Ignatian family, and offering some inputs from, we could say, philosophical, theological, spiritual perspective, how to be in contact with the sources. Okay? So what I will going to say is not directly or explicitly connected with the main title of the conference referring to African context. But I think it is not a problem, and it doesn't matter. Because what I will try to share with you is some universal ideas or inputs, how to approach and to go deeper into the sources in whatever place, culture, or moment we are, okay? Sorry. So I can see you. So I have organized this paper in two main parts. Well, the first one will be more a general theological introduction to the concept of sources and what the sources means for an institute or religious congregations, but of course all the examples it will be taken from the Ignatian Jesuit sources. And the second part, I will try to be a bit more practical, giving some examples how the sources has been feeding Ignatian spirituality, contemporary times, and the life of the Society of Jesus in our times, okay? So, hope Father Jean-Luc will tell me the exact moment to be quiet. Yes, okay, good. So, Jesus sat down by the well. Jesus was tired and thirsty. That was in Samaria. And God revealed himself as water and source of life. Jesus also felt a thirst for the absolute in the darkest hour. And from there, in Gethsemane, he returned to his source by way of suffering and meaninglessness. I am thirsty, he said. And he invited us all to drink from him, from his life and his word, so that we will not be thirsty again. So, first point, only God is the source. The last word given by Ignatius about the world as a sign of their true identity is its participation from divine life. Just as water springs from its sources, or sun rays descend from the sun. It is the contemplation to attain love. Things are inhabited by God. They are not God, we know that. But as suggested by the metaphor, we can say that things are of his same nature, just as the water is of the same nature as its source, or sun rays are of the same nature as the sun that produced them. But there is only one source, only one God. However, there is a divinity that inhabits and laboriously maintains all creation. God, who becomes divinity, fills everything with his presence. Let me say that first in Spanish, from John of the Cross, and then into English. Mil gracias derramando, pasó por estos sotos con presura, e yéndolos mirando con sola su figura, vestidos los dejó de hermosura. Now, pouring out 1,000 graces, he paces these groves in haste, and having looked at them, with his image alone, clothed them in beauty. Going on a pilgrimage toward the deepness of our own mystery is at the same time moving toward the source that gives us life, that make us be in life, that inhabit us by laboring inside us. As the exercise 235 says, making a temple out of me. Knowing who we are is to be on our way toward God and only toward him. Any other journey to any other source is limited, unable by itself to reach the first sources. As such, it will leave us unsatisfied in some way. It is what is written in the formula of the Institute. Put God first before his eyes, and next, this Institute, which is a way to reach him. Then God, who is accessible by nature, can be reached in many and often straightforward ways, such as prayer, in many, many different ways. We reach God through the sacraments, especially in the Eucharist and the Word of God. So, notably that which has been received through Jesus, the source of living water, John chapter 4. There is also helping others, especially those in need. And finally, we find God, and God is accessible in many different charisms in the church. So, in this respect, the sources are the first place for a religious congregation to discover the passion and gifts of the Spirit within his charism. Second point, the symbolism of the sources. In religious congregations, we use the word source to refer mainly, but not only, to those texts from our beginnings that reflects those experiences that functions as a place of communion and identity for the congregation. There, in these places, we rest from an often tiring path, and we hear there in the sources the bubble of the deep current of what we are. The sources always helping to rebuild us from the inside. We often employ the sources in order to support historical, dogmatic, and of course, theological and spiritual proposals. We need the sources, and hence we use them as an unconditionally open source of information, available mostly to researchers and general public alike. But rarely, however, we do approach them for themselves in order to recognize the value, function, and meaning within the theological and mystical systems they belong to, just for being what they are, sources. That means that at any talk, at any conference, we use the spiritual exercises or the constitutions or the letter to justify an idea or to look for a precise data that we need to justify our argument, our text. But it is quite more rarely that we go just the sources because only for what they are, because they are sources. Sources and humility. Although it is not their main aim, our sources also help to make us more humble. They remind us that not everything started with ourselves, with myself, or not everything will end with myself or with ourselves. Hence, the sources liberate us from the anxiety of excessive responsibility so frequently used by our enemy to tire us through the feeling of pride for being creators of some sort. Then, sources constantly help to redefine us, and in so doing, they rectify the course of our mission. Quietly, the sources inspiring us so that all our intentions, action, operation may be purely ordered to the service and praise of His Divine Majesty. The sources are always keeping the right sense, the right direction of the institution. The sources make us feel poor by redeeming us that even in our roots, we don't own ourselves. What we feel many times as deeply ours, for example, as the Society of Jesus, does not really belong to us. For in our beginning, everything was a gift. I like very much what you said yesterday in your homily, Jean-Luc. Society, not of the Jesuits, but Society of Jesus. In the beginning was the gift. We belong to a gifted tradition that was given by God in Jesus to Ignatius and his first companions through the effort of the Spirit. However, the experience was not only that of Ignatius and his companions. In that case, it would have ended with them. But then all of them pass away, but the sources are still there. They left us, but their experience has remained with us because it was not something theirs. It was something of God in them. And this is how they experience and formulate it. When they recognize themselves as driven by the Spirit, and therefore with no right to undo the work that this Holy Spirit had been doing with them till 1539 and the deliberations in Rome. It was the author of the deliberation who wrote, well, we recognize that it was the Holy Spirit who has been leading us all this time. So we don't have the right to undo this work of the Spirit. This experience does not belong to us, but belongs to God. Neither then we do not approach to the sources only with historical or archaeological curiosity. For the experience expressed therein, accessible through words, contains and displays a mode of reaching the mystery of God, and hence a possibility made a structure, order, path, and method in order for us to live absolutely and thus our condition of creatures. The sources as a structural possibility to find God. Not just by chance, just because the Spirit of God for us congregation is alive in the sources. Point 3, the sources, words that evoke the future. As you know, sources have been recorded as texts. We will perhaps never credit enough the work of those peoples, often anonymous, that took a lot of time to record the original experiences. Texts can be approached from very different perspectives. historical, philological, exegetical, cultural, anthropological, political, and of course, theological. In turn, for each congregation, the texts of their sources are always pneumatological texts. In that, they contain the life and experience of the Spirit in a twofold way. Firstly, and above all, the experience of a person or persons who interpreted something that happened to them as coming from above, an experience in the Spirit or experience of the Spirit in them. This entail a process of inner transformation that led them to gradually conform their lives to Jesus' life. But the Spirit also worked in external transformation. When all of them established a commitment toward Christ and eventually took them to, at that time, unimaginable destinations. The first group of Jesuits, for instance, traveled to Ireland, Germany, Italy, Spain, and India because of the sources, the original experience. Sources' texts are open to the times, lives, and spaces for any other believers who, open to a similar experience, the experience of the first companions, may build their lives from the experience of the Spirit that those first ones receives and allow to display. Writing was therefore one of their greatest responsibilities. Most of my time in my office is around sources and with texts. I am not working in the archives of Festo. I'm not lucky enough to have the original manuscripts in my table, but very well edited versions of the text, And I give God thanks a lot every day for all the people that spend his life just writing at the Curia offices in Rome. And they invest their lives just copying manuscripts and allowing us now to be able to enjoy and to learn and to pray with the sources. Writing was therefore one of their greatest responsibility. It meant interpreting, making the effort to conceptualize experience that often had not a specific topic, but that were rather more intuitive and more emotive maybe than rational, as happened, for example, in Cardoner, Autobiography 30, or in La Storta, Autobiography 96. Life in the sources and life of contemporary religious individual are therefore two kinds of openness that need reach other in order to converge in the Spirit. Only whoever goes to the sources in a state of unconditional openness will feel reached by the Spirit that inhabits them, the sources, just like the sea reaches the shore. And then, when we contact the sources in this unconditional openness, it is the beginning of our transformation. It happens when we do spiritual exercises. Still, the experiences written down, they were conceptualized, put into words, and paradoxically, as written texts, they were able to fly through time. Thanks to the writers, the first charismatic experience remains not fixed in time, but open to time, helping always to construct the time of the future. Sources were written in the past, but they are always evoking future. Often, the experience of turning to the sources, in my opinion, is wrongly associated with looking back at the past, as if one were looking at old photo albums or journals carefully kept at historical archives. Indeed, Many are convinced that the sources are a topic that belongs foremost to historians and to some extent teachers or trainers, as if the task was one of transmitting past and relevant facts of the history of the congregation. That is right, of course. There is historical content in the documents that record the sources. These are facts and anecdotes, names and experiences, situations, conflicts, achievements, wishes, misunderstandings, conflicts, dreams, travels, crossroads. Everything is in the sources. We cannot and should not ignore such content, for it is a necessary first level of meaning of approach to the charism. In this very first level, historical methodology is employed in order to reconstruct that which may have happened, checking, studying the existing materials and evidence. But spirit is incarnatory and enters in time through history. It's history who opens the door to the spirit. Therefore, historical knowledge allows us to becoming acquainted with the experience of the spirit. We need facts, information about what happened in the past in order to properly root our charism in specific people and events, and be sure and convinced that this we are talking about really happened. And here we have the evidence in the source, in the text. In order to properly root our charism in specific people and events that live this or that experience in this or that way, in this or that time, we need history that will serve as a starting point for this kind of reflection, spiritual reflection, reflectire in Ignatian terminology, and to get profit from the past up to the present to move forward to the future. What gives value to the sources, however, is not primarily their age, whether they were written in the 16th century or any other past century. Their value lies in appreciating that the experience they contain is still, to a large extent, our own experience. Theologians focusing on experience cannot ignore historical work. Their reflection or theological investigation must necessarily refer to what could have happened in order to offer a creative theology of incarnation or of the spirit in the world through that precise charism. Runner could say, the grace claims for history. The spirit needs a history, a place and time. But at the same time, historians of religion, in our situation, the historians of the Society of Jesus, must read the text, the sources, as texts of experience, documents that have generated life or history and for the world through a specific person or a group of people. To cut text from their experiential life and theological value will lead to a failure in uncovering their meaning. To approach the text of the history of a religious congregation, of text of the history of the church, will always be a theological approach, even though you are always working with historical material. But your eyes, your hermeneutics, and your intention must be always spiritual, theological, or pneumatological interpretation. Does this mean that doing history of religious experience necessarily requires openness to its religious interpretation? What happened to historians that are not, for example, believers? Well, history of religious experience necessarily requires openness to its religious interpretation? Not strictly necessarily, but it will lead to, at best, an incomplete interpretation of the text, without offering at least a hypothesis regarding the religious life contained in it, hence opening them to a transcendent meaning. It is impossible to understand either its ultimate sense of or motivation that inspire them. Sometimes I'm invited to seminars or conferences or about history of the Society of Jesus. And I've many times checked that most of the historians there are not interested at all in spiritual matters, theological topics, and they are interpreting the text of the Society of Jesus from a very immanent and horizontal hermeneutics. The academic work they are doing is very, very deep or very, very valuable. In my opinion, if you put aside the theological perspective in order to know what happened in that moment, which were the main motivation of those people to go to India or to Peru or to Madagascar, if you don't enter in the spiritual experience that is supporting this travel that you are studying in very, very detail, I think that something very important, or the most important topic, is lost. Therefore, we should enter the sources experientially, so as to let them inform us about the past, and from it to conform the present and evoke the future. The work of the Spirit has displayed our charisms in time, making the original experience reach us today, then provoking the beginning of our transformation as personal individuals, but also as institutions. For we travel toward the sources through the charism, and outside of it, we find it hard to find ourselves. It is difficult to recognize the depthness of, for example, in our situation, a Jesuit vocation or being part of the Jesuit family, if we don't have this experience of direct contact with the sources. Polanco wrote, "Seeing how the first father acted should also be taken as a rule and institution of how to conduct the society. For even though they were often quiet in word, their actions speak clearly about what should be done." Needless to say, God is bigger, infinitely so, than our little charism, Jesuit charism. But that is not the point. God displays charisms as his own way of letting himself be reached by man, by women, of attracting us toward him, and so allow us to fully live our condition of children and creatures. God allows himself to be reached by men or women through the text of the sources. Here are, properly speaking, theologians, and we could say maybe in commas that the sources are like a second incarnation of the Spirit of God for the charism. God becomes word. God becomes syntax. God becomes syntaxes. God becomes semantics. God becomes grammar. God becomes grammar. So this incarnation of God in the text allows us always to find him in the text. I have only time just to few points in the part 2. So I refer briefly, now not reading, about 4 elements in which the sources inspire us and are there supporting our vocation. Then, in which 4 aspects we could say that the sources are always supporting and inspiring us. First point would be the sources' environment of vocation. What does it mean? When a person feels that God maybe is calling him or her to be part of this or that institute, we must recognize that the call comes from the Spirit. Through the mediation maybe of a young, attractive Jesuit or woman, because of experience this person had in a retreat, or through a conversation maybe with Jesuits, maybe because of a liturgy he experienced in one of our celebration masses, etc. But all these mediations will never be taken as the definite criteria, of course, to admit this person into the process of formation in the congregation. How this process will be illuminated, and could we confirm that this comes from God? Well, if we help this candidate, this young boy or girl, to descend in a solitary way to the Spirit remain and incarnate in the sources. Yesterday appeared the question here about this dialectic between individual experience and communal, synodal, groupal experience. Well, this is something that a person must do by himself or herself. Never a group can decide the vocation for another person. How do we do it? In contact, in direct contact with the sources. To check the authenticity of a call coming from God to this or that institute is just putting this person in direct and solitary contact with the sources. We used to do it when we offer the people, and it is in our constitution, the experience of the spiritual exercises, the long retreat. That's fine. That's fine. But listen, it's not enough. It's not enough. Spiritual exercises, even though a person at the end of the spiritual is feeling a great and very deep consolation, it doesn't mean that this boy has a vocation for the Society of Jesus. No. My brother, my aunt, many people can do exercises and feel and pray with the eternal King. It doesn't mean that they are being called to be part of the Society of Jesus. Because we must put them in contact also with the constitutions, with another sources. So you are being called by God to follow him in that way, in that way. In other words, the come with me of the meditation of the eternal King, exercise 98, becomes in this way, in the constitutions, something that never the exercises can offer to the person. So the sources, the integration and the complementarity of the sources are always helping us to discern our own vocation and the vocation of others. It was GC 35 who introduced a significant innovation with respect to the 3 previous congregations, 34, 33, and 32. And the congregation GC 35 and after 36 uses expressions such as Ignatius and the first companions, friends in the Lord, the liberation of the first fathers. So trying to illuminate and to inspire the life of the contemporary Society of Jesus, putting in contact, in direct experience with the experience of the first Jesuits. Second point, so first, sources and vocation. Second, the sources and environment of community. Yeah. In the sources, we can find expressions like this: friends in the Lord, to love and serve in everything, take Lord and receive, contemplatives in action, sinners by called. We are sinners. A Jesuit is a sinner, but called. A fire that lights other fire. What does it mean? Why saying this, all this? Because the sources act as a communal field of shared language and tradition. The sources attracts all the members to a center of energy which serves the function of arranging roles and responsibility, authority and obedience, and the communal dimension of the mission and calling becomes more clear. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter your responsibility, what you are doing, the mission you have been sent to, but the sources have the power and the energy to evoke and to attract all of us to the same point, where Jesus Christ and the Spirit is always waiting for us. Well, we just could look around in this conference room. So many people from so many different countries, places, people who have the experience of take part in the general congregation. Why all these people, even though they need sometimes translation, because they speak different languages, Italian, French, German, English, Spanish, different language, but the same grammar. There is a common field of understanding that is beyond the language we are really speaking in this moment. Which grammar is this? It's the grammar of the sources. It's the grammar of the Spirit. Finally, the sources and environment for government. Yes. I will take the Father Kolvenbach example. And during his long term in government, 1983 to 2008, Father Kolvenbach managed to stay fully committed to a desire to keep the Ignatian inspiration alive. I was reading through the 2 volumes of the Father Kolvenbach writings, and discovered there more than 600 references to the text of the exercises, 250 quotations from the constitutions, and a high number of numerous references to St. Ignatius' autobiography and his letters. Father Kolvenbach was so convinced that the mission of contemporary Society of Jesus must be rooted in the sources and the experience of the first companions. Just very few examples. Ecumenism and interfaith or interreligious dialogue. Kolvenbach used the example of the geographical dispersion of the first members of the society when greeting the ecumenical Jesuit meeting in Chantilly about interreligious dialogue, 1986. Looking at the meaning of the presupposition in the spiritual exercises, 22, Kolvenbach exhorts them to be patient in the common church and dialogue. Kolvenbach, when addressing the Jesuits who work alongside the Muslims, 1990, he reminds them of the reference to the Turks in the Formula Institute about the apostolate with refugees. The very contemporary issue of attention to refugees can easily be connected to early care given by Ignatius and his companions to refugees in Rome in 1537. Education, and Kolvenbach talking many places, universities and colleges and high schools, always referring to the first experience of the first Jesuit. Even faith and science. Quotation. It is fair to ask, what may be the connection between Ignatius Loyola, a medieval gentleman, with history of Sarriá Chemical Institute in Barcelona, in Spain. But Kolvenbach start talking about the desire of the Society of Jesus and the Jesuits involved in intellectual apostolate and in science research. Conclusion. Since God separated the earth from the waters, the oceans, the sea, has been in a constant and eternal process of change. The oceans are always changing, but it is always the same oceans. Indeed, we can contemplate the sea from the shore for hours, even during days. And while we live we are always seeing the same sea. We see a different and unique things every moment. Every wave breaks on the shore in a new way, similar to the one before, but never quite the same. All of them are made up of the same water. They all belong to the same sea. In a similar way, our sources remain the same, always in the same text from the 16th century, yet always awakening and encouraging new forms of life within our institution and tradition. The Four Apostolical Universal Preference is a very contemporary example of this. The sources are open to become known and interpreted in different times and places, Africa, India, Asia. But surprisingly, they are able to help build the same identity. They inspire the same vision and direct our institution to its sole end, to help souls. Final word. So approach the sources. Read the sources from your own experience. Pray with the sources. But mostly, care the sources, because the sources have been carrying us for the last 450 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, José, for this wonderful presentation. The title of the presentation is Drawing Inspiration from the Sources. And José divided his presentation in two parts. The first is, when we talk of sources, what are they? What do we mean by sources? First point, José reminded us that God is the only source. He is the source. And he invites us to drink from him, from his word. Using John of the Cross, he reminded us how God made himself available through creature and clothed creature with his divinity to make himself accessible to us through prayer, the Eucharist, and many charisms in the church. Second point, the sources are what the sources meant for congregations. They are places of communion and identity for religious congregation. They contain information useful for research, but more importantly, they help us they keep us humble, reminding us that not everything starts and ends with us, but instead, whatever we are as congregations, whatever charism we may have, is a gift from God. It reminds the members that congregations do not belong to them, that congregations are a gift. St. Ignatius and the first companion passed, but God-given, God-inspired sources remained with us. Using the formula, the deliberation of the first fathers, he quotes we have no right to undo the work of the Spirit, unquote. The source, thirdly, are words that evoked the future. They were recorded as texts by people, often anonymous, who recorded the original experience, the charismatic stage of the institution. Those sources are therefore open to times and contexts. They are kept alive in writing as they are reinterpreted, reimagined, reclaimed, reopened for our own transformation. What matters with sources is not the age. The spiritual exercises were written in the 16th century in Europe. It is not the age, but how much they still give meaning to our own experience, to our own time. Speaking to me, he says, historians must read the text as texts of experience, begging for a religious and spiritual interpretation. We should approach them experientially. In the second part, he focused more on how these sources are important to maintain the charism of our institutions. First, he says, sources are a field for vocations. God allows himself to be reached by men and women through sources. The vocation of a candidate is confirmed not only in the experience of a retreat, for example, but in conformity with the sources. As the candidate is introduced directly and in a solitary manner to the sources, he or she is called by God to follow him in a particular way. The source, secondly, are an environment for community life. They act as a communal field. In them we have our common language, our ultimate authority. Thirdly and finally, the sources are an environment for government. Using Kolvenbach's writing, he reminded us that the mission of the society today, in that spirit of aggiornamento post-Vatican II, is to be rooted in the sources, in the experience of the first companions. In conclusion, like Jesus, the source, are the same yesterday and today and forever. We need to approach them, we need to read them, we need to pray with them, and we need to care for them. Can we clap again for José García? So now we have about 15 to 20 minutes for interaction. So we'll take 3 questions and then give José the opportunity to answer. She's there.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And at one point you mentioned about the need to read with spiritual eyes, so pneumatological, theological, spiritual, even though we're dealing with historical material. And you also mentioned about the importance of not only with the immanent hermeneutic, but also something transcendent hermeneutic. So that was very intriguing for me, because there have been criticisms or comments that many of us have tendency to spiritualize many things that are not supposed to be read in that through that lens. So how do you explain further on that criticism of overly spiritualizing things, readings? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. religious communities are born in several ways. Through the lived experience of the founders, which gradually becomes the sources of the congregation, but there are also those that are born, there are also congregations formed by persons who have not lived the experience to respond to certain needs. For example, there are some bishops who can begin congregations to take care of some needs of the diocese. So in this second situation, what can be the relationship between those who live the experience that the founder has not lived and the source which is the Holy Spirit, but which came through the founder who hasn't the experience that he's proposing to others?
Third question, Marcel. Here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for José, for the wonderful presentation. If I were to have a reincarnation, I would be a historian.
Welcome.
Marcel?
And partly because I come from a country that needs professional historians. I'm just wondering to what extent you deal with biases that comes with dealing with sources. Because you don't enter into a sources with a tabula rasa. And so even within our own Society of Jesus, we also come with a lot of baggage. So can we speak of objectivity in dealing with sources? Or to what extent can we deal with some degrees of hypotheses in sources? That's my question. Thank you very much.
We answer and then we take a second round.
Yeah, when I was saying that inspired maybe by Father Kolvenbach, it doesn't mean that what we are trying to do in a religious congregation 400 years or 540, 50 years after the life of the founders of the society, of course, many new dimensions of mission are appearing in what means the borders or go to the frontières, as the Formula Institute said to the Indians. Today, Father Nicolas said that these places are different than in the 16th century. So many different apostolates and ministries and what to do, in fact, will be maybe quite different from the 16th century. But the sources are always inspiring us and giving us a spiritual foundation or motivation to do this or that. If a congregation, for example, receives an instruction from the church, a diocesan bishop or a delegate from the Pope, and encourage this congregation to do this or that, well, in my opinion, this congregation should revise their constitutions and their canon law and their particular statutum, no? And says if the mission they are going to receive fits in that first spirit that they receive, and this is forever written in their foundational text. I mean, the church cannot give any kind of mission or ministry or apostolate that goes against the first charisma of the Society of Jesus, no, or of any other religious congregation. If you were, maybe your foundation was specifically for educational ministry or to run hospitals, for example, no, they can, a bishop or any other authority in the church would not ask you to be a theologian in Oxford or a theologian in Hekima College. No, we were founded to run hospitals, not to do theology, for example, like that. No, I suppose that exercises of discernment, enter into a dialogue inside the church, preserving the spirit of thinking and feeling with the church, but always keeping care of our own vocation and our own charism. No? This is what is specific of the Society of Jesus, is that we were founded to be open and to remain always open to the mission that the Holy See really wanted to give to the Society of Jesus, okay? So be ready for everything. It is what is behind this, no? Be ready for everything. You will never know what to do, so be ready for that. Maybe the very wide and deep formation of the Jesuits in early times and today is because this desire of being competent to be able to respond to any kind of apostolate given by the church, no? So we enter the sources. Always as historians or researchers of the history of the Institute, and we understand that history is a fundamental point for the identity and mission of the contemporary times, but we enter always into the sources from a specific academical discipline. In my opinion, it is very rich for an institution like a historical institute here or in Comillas or in Rome or in other places in the world to have an interdisciplinary team. So mostly historians, of course, but theologians or philologists or anthropological, we always approach the sources from this transcendental perspective as believers, believe with the faith and conviction that Spirit is waiting for us there in these words, in these texts, in these pages, and we always have this lens to go deeper into the text, but at the same time we are working with our own discipline. No, we are if not the same work with the sources from anthropologists, that from a theologian, that from a historian. No, but each of them has the competence to look at the same text from different perspectives, but all of them share the same grammar, that God is waiting for us in this text from the experience of Ignatius and his first companions. I remember it was Congregation GC 35, I don't remember exactly, decree number 2, that the Jesuit, looking at him, looking at Christ, we recognize who we are. Looking at him, we receive the identity as Jesuits. That's, of course, this is true, but a Franciscan or a Dominican could say the same. We look at Jesus Christ, and from Jesus Christ, we receive our identity. What makes particularly and gives identity to each congregation is that we look at the same Christ from different perspectives. So, and the gift given by the Spirit to Francis Assisi or to Domenico de Guzman or to St. Ignatius Loyola offers to the church a new perspective to enter into the mystery of Christ. You know? So this is from looking at him, we discover who we are. Yes, from this particular perspective. No? And this is the charisma that the Holy Spirit gave to the church. So, yeah.
So, final round of questions. Make them short. If you go beyond 1 minute, I give you a red card. So we start with, okay, since you are there, Leo, then Kifle, then Foro.
Thank you very much, Father, for this deep reflection. Sorry. Even with this, we cannot hear. Thank you very much for this deep reflection. I'm just wondering, this is more personal now. What led you to the sources?
Leo.
Yeah.
Kifle is there, then Foro.
Father José, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the input. It's well appreciated. My question is regarding vocations. How can we use the sources for our brothers' vocation in the society?
Thank you.
The same
Excuse me, when you are saying brothers, are you...
The Jesuit brothers.
The Jesuit brothers. Yeah, this is a specific juridical term, not Jean-Luc as my brother. No. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. So I'm expressing the same gratitude for the presentation. My question is very simple. Do we have other sources than textual, and what would be their relevance or importance for the same goal that you have been brilliantly presenting to us? Thank you.
Thank you very much, José. We will have 5 minutes, no more, to respond to all these questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo, for your question. As Jean-Luc said in this marvelous, thank you very much, introduction or presentation, I was doing my studies of philology or linguistics at Salamanca University. And then my final thesis in 92, it was about a lexical semantic study of the spiritual diary. I started from Hispanic philology, historical of the Spanish department, doing a study of the language of Ignatius Loyola reflected in the spiritual diary as the faithful manuscript of Ignatius Loyola. Even the autograph we preserve here is not is Ignatius' handwriting. We don't know who was the author of this handwriting manuscript, but we know truly that the spiritual diary was written, these two parts of the spirit, by Ignatius. No? So I started my first dialogue with the nation sources there in it was 92. Then we decided, the provincial decided, to continue with doctoral studies. So I went a step forward in the spiritual diary, and then I entered into the letters. We tried to select the letters signed and manuscript by Ignatius Loyola, discerning them, separating them from other letters, 3,800 letters more or less written by Polanco and other secretaries, but mainly Polanco. No? Since that moment, I have been always, in contact with the sources. No? I had a privilege that in my faculty, the dean, the faculty allows us to give priority to Ignatian studies, especially working with the spiritual exercises, diary, letters, constitutions, and deliberation, and blah, blah, blah. No? And since then, this has been, I'm a part of a very interesting group, what we call the Grupo of Espiritualidad Ignaciana, J, Grupo Ignatian Spirituality, and this has really helped us, each of us, very much, keeping in touch with the sources. So, vocation for, I would say that it is not at all a problem to establish a difference between Jesuit brothers or Jesuit fathers. The sources are the same. The sources are the same. And the sources are the illuminating any process of vocation discernment for everyone. In my opinion, it's not relevant if a person is praying or looking, trying to discern if God wants him to be a brother or become a father or be ordained. I mean that there are elements, very deep theological insight in the sources to help which will be the best way or the chosen way by God for this or that person. I had never thought in that perspective. As you know, I was going to say something about the Formula Instituti, but there is no time. And then another sources, yes, thank you very much. I said that in my contribution, I said that we understand by sources mainly, but not only. We said we refer to the sources and we understand immediately text and go to the archives and see, but not to touch. Festo, we are allowed to see, but not to touch the text. No, well, we are referring always to text, but no. We are all, in theology, we also recognize, for example, places. places as places that the institutions recognize as where something happened there that is so charismatic and powerful for us. It doesn't matter where you came from, but in Loyola, every of us, we find a mother house for everybody, or Loyola, or Javier, or Paris, for example, the Chapel of Montmartre, or Rome, of course. No? So the sources and places are also inspiring us. They are not writing or giving very conceptualized ideas, but visiting there and staying there and praying there, we enter also in contact, deeply contact with the sources. I think so.
Thank you very much. We can stop there and take a break.
To describe my role in the multiple settings as just that of a spiritual director. As a woman journeying with other women, the experience is more mutual than it is directive. Like Mary and her cousin Elizabeth in the Gospel, or even Naomi and Ruth. When I journey with another woman, we both experience a mutually transforming, enriching, and renewing grace. We sing the Magnificat together, we lament together, and we embrace God together. So the opportunities to accompany fellow women on their spiritual journeys and pilgrimages in formal and informal settings have revealed new insights to me that I would like to share with you at this conference on the spiritual exercises in the African context. The feminine sources of Ignatian spirituality. What are the sources of Ignatian spirituality more generally, and the spiritual exercises more specifically? It is customary to go back to the conversion experiences of Saint Ignatius and his early writings as the formative experiences of what we now celebrate as Ignatian spirituality. As a practitioner and as a theologian, I believe that exploring the life and spirituality of Ignatius is an incomplete exercise if we do not so acknowledge, recognize, underscore, and celebrate the role and contribution of women. Anybody who has read my book, Why Do You Trouble This Woman? Women and the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, knows that my foundational thesis is the claim that women played an irreplaceable and pivotal role in the spiritual formation of Ignatius, and by extension, the spiritual exercises and the ensuing Ignatian spirituality. History has preserved the names of these women and the formative roles they played in the life of Ignatius. Yet, there is trouble in the spiritual exercises. But here is the troubling irony. Even as I affirm the feminine sources of Ignatian spirituality and the spiritual exercises, we cannot gloss over two facts. First, Ignatius's experience with some women was not always smooth sailing. At best, they were fraught with tension, at worst, laden with acrimony. So without seeking to find fault in a somewhat anachronistic manner, it is fair to say that both sides bore a share of the blame. And here is the second fact. The prescribed practice of Ignatian spirituality in the spiritual exercises promoted a biased and sexist view of women. No one who reads the spiritual exercises as a text or makes it as a prayer can fail to notice uncomplimentary stereotypical portrayals of women. So from my experience of joining with and accompanying women on their spiritual pilgrimage, I would like to propose and explore 3 paths that women, especially African women, can adopt to enter more deeply into the experience of Ignatian spirituality through spiritual exercises. The first path is what I call embodiment. Women's bodies are a privileged locus of encounter with the divine. Also, in Africa, women's bodies are the sites of multiple injuries, abuse, and exploitation, from domestic abuse to human trafficking, sexual abuse to economic and social exploitation, exclusion from opportunities to cultural marginalization. That is not to mention the multiple roadblocks to their aspirations for ministry and leadership in church and society. Yet, when, as women, we encounter the divine, we come with a singular capacity of doing so with all our pain and anguish, our joys and hope. It is almost as if we carry in our bodies more than one personality. We are the Maccabees' mother of the 7 stones, and Rachel wailing and lamenting the evils that have been visited on us. We are Mary, Miriam, Anna, and Elizabeth in exultant singing of the goodness of God in our lives. We are the Syrophoenician woman bearing insult from Jesus of Nazareth. We are Mary offering hospitality to a wearied stranger in the village of Bethany. We are the woman engaging a stranger in deep theological discourse at high noon at the well of Jacob. We are Mary Magdalene, tenderly embracing a beloved dead, raised to life. These are multiple and unique ways in which we come into the space of prayer, into the space of the spiritual exercises. We leave nothing behind, whether it is our anxiety over raising children as single mothers, or our challenges as religious, struggling to run a school or a hospital in the remotest part of Africa, or young women confronted with the evil of sexual, gender-based violence. So we come in who we are and as we are. That is in our bodies. We leave nothing behind, and this is what I call embodiment. With this capacity and gift, it is not hard for us to embrace the application of senses as a form of prayer which permeates the entirety of the spiritual exercises. As you know, when the retreatant is engaged in contemplation, Ignatius invites them to use the imagination and apply all 5 senses. This is clearly an invitation to the experience of embodiment. So for this reason, I underscore in my book that for the woman of the exercises, a heartfelt knowledge of God is not simply disembodied and disincarnate, nor is it merely intellectual or general. It is experiential. It is experiential and intentional acts of love. So as a woman, the spiritual experience flows through my body. There are no off-limits when it comes to how strands of my life and experience are woven into the tapestry of prayer and reflection, meditation and contemplation. Like the tortoise, whose body is also its house, I come as I am and bring who I am in the totality of my being into this graced moment. I embody in my life and work the presence and gifts of the Spirit. I am at home with divinity in my body. The second part is imagination. Imagination is closely related to embodiment. The spiritual exercises is predominantly an exercise of the imagination. As an African woman, the way I have experienced this dimension of the spiritual exercises is captured in the subtitle of Elizabeth Libet and Annemarie Paulin-Campbell's groundbreaking work, The Spiritual Exercises Reclaimed, Uncovering Liberating Possibilities for Women. The key term is liberating possibilities. The imaginative quality of Ignatian spirituality serves as a liberating tool, means, or instrument for mining the depth, wisdom, and possibilities of the spiritual exercises. For me, imagination is that unique power that is available to women who desire a full-bodied experience of spirituality, unrestricted or bound by prescribed stereotypical norms for naming the experience of the divine. To be clear, in making this assertion, I'm not proposing a radical or iconoclastic feminine appropriation of the spiritual exercises. On the contrary, I am retrieving a long-standing tradition of women, especially in the scripture, who, as I say in my book, demonstrate the power of women to imagine God's liberating tenderness and love.
Of the Sisters of Social Services for the beautiful short presentation. Unfortunately, we couldn't hear her conclusion. So we'll keep that. Please write down your questions before the next. So the next is on spiritual exercises for all in Africa, online approach, to be given by Dr. Aurélien Folifack of the Society of Jesus. Please come forward. So Father Folifack was ordained in 2006. He holds a PhD in Biblical Studies from the Université Catholique de Louvain, 2018, and a background in physics and chemistry. He has served as vice parish priest in Douala and associate to the novice master at the Jesuit novitiate in Bafoussam, Cameroon, where he also preached long retreats. Since 2018, he has taught scripture and biblical languages at the Institut de Théologie de la Campagne
the Jesuit, where he is currently the principal and formerly served as academic secretary. So we welcome him for this wonderful presentation.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity to present this online experience, which has been going on for almost 20 years, since 2014. Go to the next one. Yes. Chair, how many minutes do I have? 20 minutes. 20. Okay. Okay, you can change already. Change. Go to the next one. Okay, I'll say how this experience began, the methodology I used for this presentation, what are the elements of this online retreat, and what are the relations with the Ignatian spirituality, and the strength and limit of this experience, and the conclusion. The next one. So everything began with a meeting with a Jesuit in Cameroon in 2013, in Maroua, during the ordination of Norbert Litouin. I met Father Takunju Guy Rodrigue, who is actually working in Chad. I think he's on sabbatical this year. And we share. And he described how the experience of Lent changed his life as he was doing his doctorate and went back in Chad, where he was mission. It became this experience of Lenten retreat, yes, in 2013, actually. And then the Islamic context of Chad play also a role with the issue of fasting. Yes, the fasting dimension is also a way for Christians to show also to Muslims that they can fast as well, and so seriously. And then for him, he told me that the fast he applied, he prescribed to the participant was the same, like that of the Muslim. No water, no eating from 6 p.m. to the evening. So I was interested by go to the next. I was interested by the experience, and I told him that I'll join him doing it. And my own interest in spiritual exercise, as they said, comes from my passage at the novitiate, where I worked for 3 years with Father Joachim, who is here present, who pushed me, I can say, into the ministry of the spiritual exercise, saying all the time that I don't have time to give retreat to external sisters who are coming, and then say, you are there, go and then also together you have to give the long retreat, to preach the long retreat to the novices, which most of the time were so many. So during those 3 years, I really gained an interest in giving the spiritual exercise. And one of the reasons of this experience is a lack of spiritual offering during Lenten season, yes, in many places. Move to the next page, please. So I'll just show the structure. We have usually what I will call a steering committee, what I will call pool of recruitment, accompagnator, and then the participant. So go to the next slide. So the structure is just like this. You have a steering committee because the experience have been growing through time, with the entrance of other Jesuits joining, either as accompagnator or as member of the steering committee. The role of the steering committee is the preparation of the point of meditation. Each Jesuit or a sister or a lay from Ignatian spirituality will take 1 week of the Lenten season, the preparation of few conferences on Christian life, also on Ignatian spirituality, and also on organization, because you need a lot of organization, as you will come to see, that sometimes we can reach up to 600 participants. And then it's like each one has a pole. Takunju used to be in Jamena, but he stopped the experience in 2020 for personal reason. And me, I began in Louvain-la-Neuve when I was doing my doctorate. And then later on, I continue in Abidjan. I have my group, my participant. And then another Jesuit in Bafoussam, who is the socius actually, I think. No, the minister, Bationo Daniel. He has his own group. And then for a time, there was also a Belgian Jesuit who joined, who is called Philippe Mabe, and who used to have his group. He did it for a few years and stopped. And then each of us have a group of accompagnators who can be Jesuit or non-Jesuit. And so I'm going to speak of my own experience, which is the second column. So only my own, what I have been doing. But we share the material. So the meditation are sent to all the participants of each group. And the conferences also are shared. And each group has its own organization. Move to the next slide. So the content is mostly external sign of the retreat, what I call then fast and abstinence. I will speak about it. Daily meditation, 30 minutes, and daily examination or review of the day, 10 to 15 minutes. Accompaniment conferences and intercessionary prayer. Each one will intercede for each other. Because people come to this retreat with material needs of childbirth and so on. So I will speak of the experience, and then I will show the relation to the spiritual exercises, and then I will do a kind of evaluation. So the elements of the retreat are the internet, connection and social media, accompaniment, fasting and abstinence, and then some exercises which are proposed, the time of the experience, and then I say also it's a truly synodal experience, and I will give some statistics. So the condition to take part to this retreat is to have a good connection, internet connection, and an email address. No WhatsApp, no Facebook, no Messenger, because we consider those media not with the issue of instantaneity and immediacy, which don't make them serious, and sometimes the mass of messages that people sometimes don't read. And we say we should not use WhatsApp, neither no Facebook, no Messenger. And we find many advantages with, of the communication through email, the possibility to archive data, and then a kind of distance created by the fact that someone can take time to respond, that distance, which also gives a seriousness to the experience, and then the freedom. You are not forced, like when you receive a WhatsApp message, to respond on the spot. When you receive an email, you can decide when to respond. And then I'll give other advantages in terms of accompaniment. So accompaniment was at the beginning a condition for participation. So it's a kind of criteria to verify that someone is doing the experience, that you can share with someone. And then the accompagnator is a witness, as we understand it. Most of them are lay, Jesuits, and religious, some nuns, or religious of other, but all of them mostly who have been trained, who have an experience in accompaniment. So, one of the conditions of to be accompagnator is also to do the retreat. You need to fast and to pray as you are directing others so that you can understand their problem. So you are not just an external observer. So accompaniment, we use the email, which present many advantages, I have said. The first of all, the possibility to accompany many. For instance, you receive mails, and then you can take time to respond. In 1 hour, you can respond to 5 to 10, depending on the depth of the question of the sharing. Whereas in physical, you can accompany one person in 1 hour, normally, or 2 at most. The written format allows people to put their experience into words, which helps them to share very deep things sometimes. Some confidence are difficult to share face-to-face, as I've discovered. People really share true issue they are facing in their life. And then the accompagnator also have time to reflect and ponder his response, which is not immediate. So that accompaniment normally is done formally, but participants are also encouraged to do it more often. So, and every time there's a questionnaire which is designed to help participants on fasting, the prayer, and especially the impact on daily life. But for the accompaniment, other media can be used. In agreement with the accompagnator, they can agree to call through WhatsApp, Zoom, or Skype, or Messenger, or to meet physically if they are in the same city. Some who are in Abidjan came to see me one or twice. Through time, we are also observed resistance to accompaniment, yes. So, and after some time, I make it free, seeing that people were resisting, not accepting to make that sharing. And from evaluation, I can realize that it has touched around 30% of the participants, yes, those who really share what they are living, yes. And then one of the things is fasting and abstinence, yes. I call them external sign of the retreat, because for a closed retreat, you retreat somewhere, you move somewhere. So fasting is a sign that I'm doing a retreat for 40 days. So normally 1 meal a day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. according to each person's capacity. There are some who, so there are various types. So some who take 2 meals, some who take only one part of each meals, and so on. And also abstinence from sexual relationships and from alcohol, outside marital bonds, those who are not married. So other penance also can be chosen, for instance, various addiction and addiction to social media or to phone. And then the content of the exercises are usual. We use the Lenten reading, yes, for 30 minutes, and then the review of the day, examination of conscience, 10 to 15 minutes, and then some conferences of Christians' life. And then when you go through the reading of the Lenten time, you realize that they speak so much about conversion. So that means that we are mostly in the first week, and also Passion, and the last day, Resurrection. So they are first and third week, yes. So the dynamic of having these two exercises every day is interaction between prayer and life. So you pray in the morning, and then you live during the day, and at the end of the day, you make a kind of evaluation of whether you have lived your prayer in the morning or not. So the topic of spiritual conference, of course, are an aspect of spiritual exercises, the method of prayer at the beginning, and at the beginning of each point of meditation, some aspect of Christian life, value of the fasting. We explain what the importance of doing it, Eucharist, social sin, reconciliation, healing, care of oneself, justice, and so on. Participants are also encouraged to attend daily masses and or service in their church. There are some who are not Catholic, and also to confess. And then another element is the intercessory prayer for each other. We intercede for each other. So for material need, job, fecundity, healing, and also spiritual need, reconciliation, and healing. And usually, at a given time, okay, so it's normally 40 days, normally 36 days. We also that dimension, I call it a synodal experience, which means that people pray for each other. We are journeying together as brother and sister seeking the Lord. A list of names are sent daily with intention, prayer intention, and each participant is asked to pray on it. And then I give some statistics. This is the name of few countries where the participants come. Most of them are African. You have few Italian, few French people, but most of them are Africans spread in all those countries. I forgot few names. And then these are the statistics during the years. So you realize that maybe in 2023 was the peak with more than 600 participants. Yes, we are a team. And I have a lady who is in charge, who volunteers to receive the registration and to answer some practical messages. So the Ignatian Foundation of the Experience, annotation 18 and 19. So let me not say too much because we are use of this. You have also the interaction within life, and also the issue of fasting. We find all this in the spiritual exercise, penance during the exercise, and all type of, yes. So let me just go to the conclusion. The strength and the limit of this experience. Okay, so positive transformation of relationship in family as a couple and at the professional level, spiritual growth or desire to pray, spiritual exercises, inner silence, self-control, sense of communication created by intercessory prayer, conversation and reconciliation in family and as couple, transformative experience of encountering God, and so on. Positive impact of the retreat on the CLC groups. There are some CLC groups in Abidjan and also in Cameroon who have adopted this retreat as their annual retreat. And sometimes they do in group. One will print the meditation and share to everyone. So we have also that synodal dimension, the sense of the Lord presence, learning of Ignatian method of praying, and several intentions were granted, for instance, healing, liberation, the grace of childbirth, deliverance, good news, and so on. So we have some limitation also, slow registration, abandoned by some participants, laziness or lukewarmness for existential religion, business, trip, bereavement, and illness, difficulty with Ignatian method of prayer, difficulty to actually verify if people are praying, and some responsibility can make it difficult for people to find time to pray. And some retreatants who emphasize more external requirement more than the spiritual content of the retreat. Then, also, time you are forced to expound the point of meditation because people are from various backgrounds. And then sometimes you have death or retreat, and during retreat, for instance, this lady, Justine Nataka, who died in 2020, during the retreat, we have a sharing, and then the next week, I heard that she has died by somebody else since she was no longer communicating. Sometimes we have problem of communication, people don't respond, resistant to accompaniment, difficulty finding accompaniment because the ministry is free, no charge. I have been insisting on it that no payment is given, though some participants were insisting to, Father, how does it cost to do this retreat? I say it's free. Yes, conclude. Okay, I have here some testimony. Okay, I will just, you will read them, some of them in the paper. And then, conclusion, the 12 years of online retreat have been a wonderful experience. For instance, the way of vulgarize Ignatian spirituality to help to spiritual growth of Christian, it takes also into account their material and spiritual needs, experience of gratuitous ministry, and then an experience of collaboration between us Jesuits, because there were a time we were almost 5 to 6 Jesuits collaborating, and lay people, and also religious. Synodal experience, the experience have benefited so many people over the years, and but we need to improve it. You are commend and are welcome. Thank you.
Everyone. It's a tremendous gift to be here with you, to share something of the passion that I have for the training of people to give the spiritual exercises of Ignatius. I'm going to focus on the training of directors to give the full spiritual exercises in the 19th and 20th annotations. My observations are grounded in the work done by the Jesuit Institute South Africa over the past 2 decades, and post-COVID through the use of technology and international ecumenical online training currently offered through the Institute called the Ignatian Spiritual Exercises Training. In reflecting on this experience, I want to highlight some principles that may be helpful in the consideration of training givers of the exercises for the African context. It is of critical importance that those who come to be trained have the charism. Without a natural gift for deep listening and tuning into the movement of the Holy Spirit, no amount of training will suffice. In considering applicants, we look for a long journey of growing in relationship with God, a substantive life of prayer, the experience of having found God in life's joys and challenges, and a deep desire to journey with others. Applicants must themselves have experienced the full spiritual exercises accompanied by a competent guide and be able to articulate something of the impact of that experience. We have found it critical that those training to give the exercises already have the foundation of both training and experience as a spiritual accompanier. We might ask, why train people at all to give the spiritual exercises? After all, the great Jesuit historian John O'Malley tells us from his study of the early years of the Society of Jesus that the main preparation for those giving the exercises was the experience of having made them well oneself, coupled with a kind of apprenticeship with a more experienced giver of the exercises, with Ignatius being the master teacher. Many Jesuits have indeed trained in this way, working in retreat houses under highly experienced givers of the exercises. However, given the number of people being trained, many lay people, and the fact that there are few retreat houses and people able to offer the kind of intensive apprenticeship needed, we are at a time where it is important for us to be offering training. I believe a key principle of good training to become a giver of the exercises is that of creative fidelity, a phrase first used by the former general of the Society of Jesus, Peter Hans Kolvenbach. Our aim should be to train and empower people who have the charism to give the exercises in a way that is both faithful to the intent and the pedagogy of Ignatius and creative in applying the exercises to the one making them and their context. The exercises are a living tradition, and as Michael Ivins says, each time the exercises are made, they are being rewritten. To give the exercises faithfully, the giver must know them so well that they can offer them to the retreatant in a way that is attentive to how the Spirit is at work in this particular person, shaped as they are by their life context and circumstances. Philip Endine suggests that we translate the Spanish word aplicar as to apply the exercises rather than to adapt, because adaptation can give the erroneous impression of dilution or compromise, whereas to faithfully apply the exercises is to enhance them. Festo Makenda, in a wonderful article, The Spiritual Director as Cultural Translator, points to the critical importance of training givers of the exercises who have a deep understanding of both the culture of Ignatius and that of the exercitant, so as to be able to translate the exercises in a way that will resonate for the person in their own context. In training givers, this is the sensitivity that we wish to develop. Training givers of the exercises, to offer them in the African context, requires an appreciation of the richness and complexity of our African experience. There we go. On the one hand, there are some common themes. Isaac Kiyaka, in a 2007 conference in Ethiopia on the exercises, named among them a reverence for the eternal mysteries, the intrinsic unity of the individual and the community, a sense of deep interconnectedness with the universe and with each other. While there are common themes, as John Mbiti and others have said, we cannot speak of one hegemonic African culture. African culture is rich and diverse, and there is a multiplicity of cultural experience. A person living in the township of Soweto will have a very different context and experience to one living in Zimbabwe, Kenya, Botswana, or a suburb of Cape Town. We also need to be aware of the influence of intersectionality. The experience of a young black Zulu woman in South Africa is influenced not only by her Zulu culture, but also by her age, gender, race, and life experience. We know, too, that culture is dynamic, and factors such as urbanization and exposure to global cultures through social media and the disruption of traditional community structures all have impact. Even within Africa, we may find ourselves working cross-culturally and need to be very sensitive to the holy ground of the other's experience, which may be different to my own. A young laywoman, now giving the exercises at a retreat center in rural KwaZulu-Natal, said, "I once directed a priest from Zambia, and when we came to the third week, I explained how we mourn in our culture and asked him to tell me what is done in his culture. It truly helped that I could ask that question before sending him to look at the burial of Jesus. The rituals they performed before and after burial were completely different from my culture." We want to ensure the development of an attitude of creative fidelity by giving attention to three strands of attentiveness. Firstly, and most significantly, attentiveness to God, to God who as the creator deals directly with the creature, annotation 15. Secondly, attentiveness to the text and dynamic of the exercises and its carefully constructed pedagogy. And thirdly, an attentiveness to the one making the exercises, their culture and life context. These strands can be facilitated through a variety of training elements. Firstly, reflection on experience. Critical to being able to give the exercises well is the ability to reflect on one's own experience of having made them. The exercises themselves were born out of Ignatius's reflection on the way that God had worked with him. And if we take seriously the Ignatian axiom that God is present and active in our experience, it is critical that we attend to it. Before each input, it is helpful to encourage trainees to go back to their exercises journal and to look at how the dynamic unfolded for them in that time. Familiarity with the text and the context of Ignatius is a vital part of the training, but can be challenging. Certainly in the South African context, there are no translations of the text of the exercises or of the autobiography in any of the vernacular languages. In English, the language still is very anachronistic, and Ignatius's terse style is not easy. However, the story of Ignatius, though from a time and context vastly different to the Africa of the 21st century, strikes a deep chord in the human experience to which people are able to relate and creates a bridge. Trainees resonate with their own cannonball moments of life-altering experiences, times of despair such as Ignatius had at Manresa, and times when dearly held dreams cannot be pursued, as for Ignatius in the Holy Land where he was unable to stay. One way we found helpful to engage those learning to give the exercises prior to the training is through a series of recorded talks introducing Ignatius and the exercises that we were privileged to film in the Ignatian sites of Manresa, Montserrat, and Loyola, themselves sources, as we heard this morning, to give them a flavor of the context of Ignatius. Trainees are helped to come to a sense of easy familiarity with the exercises text through lecture inputs on the different moments of the exercises in which we look at the text itself. As the 1599 directory says, the director must study the text of the exercises, must have it at her fingertips, especially the annotations and rules, and weigh every matter, indeed every word, with care. In the absence of vernacular translations, we encourage David Fleming's translation, Draw Me Into Your Friendship, which Roberto mentioned yesterday, and which has both the literal and a more accessible modern translation side by side. A close study of the text enables an understanding of the dynamics involved in the Ignatian hour, day, and week, and the progressive simplification and deepening that happens through repetition, resume, and application of senses. Having engaged around the text, one can then help trainees consider how they might offer it most helpfully to the one they are accompanying, given their particular context. Let's use the example of the first week. In giving the first week to women, it may be important to be sensitive to the reality that many women struggle not so much with pride, but rather with the sin of self-neglect or hiding their gifts. There may be need for lament or for healing as part of the first week, especially if there have been deep experiences of being sinned against. Trainees working in Africa are encouraged to reflect on the first week from the point of view of an African perspective on sin. In Africa, there is a strong recognition that sin and reconciliation have significant implications for the community, and so healing and reconciliation must involve the community to be effective. In the words of Arabome, the ultimate grace of reconciliation is the restoration of the original harmony with God, self, community, and other. End quote. What does this mean for experiencing reconciliation in the context of the retreat? In the South African context, offering the exercises of the first week in the 19th annotation may include encouraging a prayerful visit to the Apartheid Museum or the Hector Peterson Memorial, both of which confront the retreatant powerfully with the reality of the evil of apartheid. When trainees have a sufficiently deep understanding of Ignatius's purpose for a given meditation or contemplation, it can be rewritten with new images more suited to the context, which help the person to more deeply receive the grace of that prayer exercise. Sometimes this means finding pictures or images that connect. They may need to rewrite the meditation using language that connects. One graduate of the training who now offers the exercises in Soweto said, "You have to be led by the retreatant, because at times you have to really simplify the reflections. You give examples that are familiar from everyday life, so it is something they would grasp, but not losing the content of Ignatius. So when I talk about the call of the king, I would usually say," she said, "think of someone who is really up there in your community, and the whole community knows this is the person who does things correctly and with love. And then I ask them to think of a person who is known in the community, but his manner of approach is hard. He commands instead of really communicating with these people. It's my way or nothing. I ask, if these two were kings, which would you follow?" As Raymond Moshe suggests, in the African context, application or adaptation may include incorporating the wisdom tradition of using stories and proverbs. A graduate of the training giving the exercises in Zimbabwe used symbols as a way of helping her retreatants to consolidate the graces received in each of the weeks. She said, "When we did the principle and foundation in the training, we were encouraged to see how we could give it to retreatants in our own context in a creative way. This inspired me at the end of each week of the exercises to invite the retreatant to come up with a painting, a drawing, a symbol that expressed how the week was for them. They might come with a rock or cloth or a plant, or some would draw an animal or a drum, or bring a picture from the house. One woman drew a hand protecting the chicks. It helps me to see the retreatant has now received the grace and is ready to move. The retreatant has grasped, prayed, has something they are holding from the week, maybe as a treasure to say, this is what I experienced." Ritual is important for many rooted in African tradition and may be key in the exercises. In the training, givers are encouraged to use ritual where it seems it might be helpful for a retreatant. One laywoman, giving the exercises to religious brothers in the 30-day retreat, invited them to write a letter to God, offering God the election that had crystallized and placing it on the altar during the Eucharist at the end of the second week. Ancestors may be a significant dimension to be woven through the experience too, perhaps as part of an extended triple colloquy and in the introductory points on the contemplatio, as the retreatant imagines him or herself standing before the divine majesty and all the saints and the ancestors who are praying for me. In some African contexts, the idea of an individual election is alien. Coming to an election may need to include consultation with elders or ancestors, in actuality or as part of imaginative contemplation. While in the West, the purpose of the exercises is often viewed as being principally about the election, in Africa, a key dimension is that of healing. For many in South Africa, with our history of apartheid, attention needs to be paid to healing of image of self and image of God, which for many has been negatively impacted. So how do we get these students to engage the context? We ask them in class, in written assignments, and in supervision to reflect on whether there are stories, images, rituals, and examples which may help this person enter into the prayer that Ignatius proposes in a way that will open it up for them and assure them that this is precisely what it means to be an authentic giver of the exercises. In the light of time, I'm just going to mention the two other key points that I won't get to. The first is exposure to a range of secondary resources. We don't have, at this stage, currently secondary resources similar to, for example, Tetlo's Choosing Christ in the World or Valtry's Orientations. We need a substantive African secondary resource that students can use alongside the text to help them as they give the exercises. The other elements would be spiritual conversation with other trainees about their experiences. This is where people are able to share and to hear what is happening in other places in the world and how applications and adaptations can be made. The last element of the training is the practicum, in which trainees accompany others through the spiritual exercises under close supervision. They usually accompany 1 or 2 people through the full spiritual exercises, meeting with a supervision group for 2 hours on a monthly basis in order to reflect on that experience and receive a kind of apprenticeship from that process. In conclusion, we have a number of challenges, and many of them have come up already in this last while. In 2013, Festo Makenda already raised the problem of a dearth of sufficiently contextualized material for reference or the training of spiritual directors, and sadly, this remains true. Aside from Anne Arabome's book, which we have heard, Why Do You Trouble This Woman?, remarkably little work has been done that has produced those kind of African resources lately. We also need to think about the issue of groups and one-on-one. Some of these. And the challenge, finally, of language. I finish with this quote. A Zimbabwean giver of the exercises said, "Someone asked me, 'Do you pray in English or in Shona?' I said I pray in English because it was how I was taught to reflect and to read the Bible. But then I express myself better in Shona. Even in English, the language of the exercises is a bit heavy. We need to keep it simple and hopefully maybe in the vernacular as well." So in terms of training, I add the plea to those that have already been expressed for translations of the text of the exercises, or at least some of the key parts. It is heartening to see how those trained are offering the exercises with creative fidelity in many different contexts, and how many lay people are being trained. However, as we reflect on empowering directors to give the exercises in our own context, we are challenged to do much, much more to create resources that resonate. Thank you.
Father Joachim Zoundi is a Jesuit priest from Burkina Faso, a spiritual director, a theologian, and an author. Formerly novice master in Bafoussam, Cameroon, he later served as spiritual father and lecturer in patristic and systematic theology at Hekima University College, Nairobi, Kenya. So he is here today to share with us ways to human excellence and bliss, the spiritual exercises and NLP. Myself, I'm trying to understand what NLP is. So we are here today to know what it is. Welcome, Father Zoundi.
Thank you very much. Because we have not a lot of time, I'm just going to present the text. As you can see, neuro-linguistic programming, LNP, is today our world contribution to excellency for human beings who desire to excel. In this sense, it is open to the endeavor of the Ignatian spiritual exercises, whom aims at the radical good of humanity in their final beatitude with God. NLP, if well known, becomes an opportunity for spiritual exercises to expand more in this secularized world and even creating depth in many persons. I'm going to introduce what I'm going to do through the second metaphor. It's the story of a young girl of 7 years old. She is mute. And in a village, it happened that people carry in a bull, but the bull was so furious, nobody could approach it. And one day, the village decided to deliberate on the problem of the bull. And they said, if for within 2 or 3 days, nobody is able to reach out to calm the bull, they will shut it down. And the girl happened to be part of this meeting with her mother. Going back home, she said to the mother, why not if we try another way to deal with the bull instead of threatening it? But, you know, grown people don't listen. They didn't listen to the girl. Then the girl repeated the same thing to the father. And nobody listened to her. Finally, the next day, she decided to go with the grandmother in the surrounding of where the bull is. And suddenly, without the grandma knowing, the bull appeared, furious. And the young girl, approached the bull, standing without fear. And when the bull realized that she was blind, not representing a threat at all, it became calm, starting breathing calmly. And then the young girl talked to the bull, saying, big man, listen, I'm here not to treat you, to treat you. I'm here to help. What is the issue? Bit by bit, the young girl realized that the bull was beaten with wild and many things that make him become rough. And through the kind approach, the young girl changed the bull and let the remaining to the end. Since the beginning of their creation, human beings have longed for bliss and excellence or achievement. That is why St. Augustine of Hippo wrote in his confession that God created humanity revolved towards him so that they cannot find peace until they rest in him. Well known. St. Ignatius of Loyola in the 16th century, taking from his own drive for happiness and excellence in God's hands, proposed his spiritual exercises, a way to bliss and excellence to people of goodwill. Nowadays, despite the fact that our world is overtaken by a massive drive into distraction, some people concerned with the well-being of others have proposed good ways to face such trends. Among these ways, coaching is presented as a major contribution to wellness and human excellency. And even if not all types of coaching are good and helpful, one particular merit to be considered, that is neuro-linguistic programming, because based on scientific ground about human knowledge and experience in life, coined in the 70s in the US at Santa Cruz, which has proved to be a solid helping tool to find one's way to happiness and if not to meaningful life. Ignatius of Loyola is known as one who initiated the dialogue with secular humanism of his time and led it to Christian humanism. From its distance, it is still relevant to make the spiritual exercises remain in dialogue with the contemporary humanism, what I call, that's why I'm presenting the LNP, proposing like that. The LNP is proposing ways to bliss and excellency from the conviction that what is deeply human has a connection to God. This conference aims at putting into dialogue the spiritual exercises and LNP mainly on the way they contribute to regulate emotion. First part, spiritual exercises and LNP as way to a quality life for humanity. The spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius aims at helping people become excellent. And here is in what sense, see spiritual exercises 21, help people to free themselves from disordered attachment and order their lives. We have heard it in other presentation. In his principle and foundation, he makes it clear the meaning and purpose of human being created to serve, reverence, and praise God, and through this save their souls. Having such meaning, human can live worthily in this world. In this sense, William Barry says that Ignatius think that God created human beings to make them happy, and the way to that happiness is to remain close to God, doing His will and becoming God's friend. Such state of life is constant consolation. We are supposed to be in constant consolation, normally. Ignatius of Loyola wanted to help others. That is why he proposed his spiritual exercises, and this is explained in the following quote. Because what he himself experienced as benefits for him, he thought could be benefit for others. Autobiography 99. Finally, the annotation 1 gives the summarizing idea, which explained by Ignatius wrote the spiritual exercises to help people order their lives and decide according to God's will, and so find salvation and happiness. So, it is clear that the aim of the spiritual exercises is to help people excel humanly and spiritually, in other words, holistically. There's a mistake there. Let us now consider the purpose of LNP. First of all, a definition of LNP. From the early development of LNP, we come to learn that LNP is an art of achieving excellence and success. It revolves around how people think, act, and interact. This reflects how the brain functions and how the language is used to perform at a peak level, both intrapersonally and interpersonally. What does it mean? I am concerned with what's going on in me. How can I understand better myself and then try to cope with understanding others outside there? From this definition, human being grows from ordinary to life of excellency when he becomes able to cope better with emotions, and the spiritual exercise is a lot of emotions, decide decisively and reach out to his goal in life. Let us say with our kings that LNP is a communicational and interpersonal skills training model. In a nutshell, LNP suggests that changing an helpful thought, feelings, behaviors, and communication patterns can help shift your worldview from bad to better, improve your relationship, as we have seen in the history of this little girl with the bull. Help you achieve goals, boost self-awareness, improve physical and mental well-being. If one uses this instrument to become a better person, contributing to make of this world a better place for all, she or he has achieved a great deal of excellence and growth. We can notice from these considerations that spiritual exercises as well as the LNP seeks human being good and even its excellency. That is why we cannot oppose them. Rather, we have to make them collaborate. For like Christ, we can say that what is not against the spiritual exercises is not against human progress, and let's consider their method now. Second point, method and strategy of these two ways to attain excellency and bliss. Ignatius of Loyola's method of helping people know God and respond to the salvation proposed them passes through a sharp knowledge of human being. First, Ignatius mentioned that there are three kinds of thoughts in every person. The one of the human person, and the two others from outside, the good spirit and the bad one. He adds that for this, we need to discern. William Barry highlights, it's speaking about Jesus' discernment, okay, where he recognized that the human heart is a battlefield for God and against God, and no one can be out of this binary. Either you are for God or against God. If we add to that the two categories of people, the one going from good to better, and the one from progressing from bad to worse, it is not. What makes Ignatius come closer to LNP is when he writes that to know is not enough to be happy. To get into happiness, one needs the capacity to taste and sense from inside. This goes together with inner emotions. This echoes with the fruit of the Holy Spirit of Galatians 5:22 to 23. This is what Ignatius calls consolation, and well summarized by William Barry when he says, spiritual consolation is an experience of being so on fire with God, love, that we feel impelled to praise, serve, and love and serve God and help others as best as we can. Spiritual consolation encourages and facilitates a deep sense of gratitude for God's faithfulness, mercy, and companionship in our life. In consolation, we feel more alive and connected to others. This state of spirit and mind is a spiritual emotion which expresses how God touches the human heart and moves it to accomplish good deeds. Just to say that spiritual exercises open us to the world of emotions, inner senses, and so on. This is what does LNP. The methodology, let's see quickly methodology. The LNP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is a way of recovering how human being functions and what happens when it functions well. We try to modelize what is going well in a person we are admiring. And in this way, if we find the law that makes that person become expert and doing well, we can imitate and accomplish the same thing. This image tells you about how LNP works. We can see here the contemplation, the application of senses uses that. The VACOG is visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactive, and gustative. We know from philosophy that all we come to get as knowledge or information come through our senses. These are processed in our mind, and from our mind we get a representation, what we call the map. This representation determines a lot of things. From the representation we interpret, and we get happy or discontent, and all the problems are there. If we want to change, we need to change our interpretation of the map. If we change our representation of the map, we can understand ourselves better, understand others outside. And for me, LNP can help us prepare well for the spiritual exercises, because it's not a pretense to be a spiritual realm, but a way to help a human person knows himself or herself better, cope with what's going inside there, and be ready to open up to the grace of God. That's why you see here the inner representation. This is all the process. And here, inside there, we have all our traditions, culture, education. All the information passes through that so that we have a map of the world, the reality. And so if we want to understand one another, we have to go to the representation of the man or the women of his reality. And so we can understand him and help him to go further. One of the key things in LNP is that we look for the best, the excellency of one another. we don't manipulate the person, we help the person to grow. And that's why it's a good connection to spiritual exercises. I think I can stop there because we see already the connection between the two. Thank you for your attention. Okay.
So thank you very much, Father Zoundi, for that beautiful presentation. And I want to thank all the presenters for keeping time. Can we put our hands together for all of them again? So we invite Dr. Annemarie to please come forward too.
Aurélien as well. Aurélien.
For Father Aurélien, please come.
To the next chair.
I'm not sure we'll be able to get Dr. Anna, Sister Anna. Are we able to get her on?
I think we will really inconvenience her.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's better.
Okay.
But we will take your questions for Sister Anne, then we can just send them to her, and she can just feed back
It's the best way.
to the team. Father Jean-Luc. Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned who you direct your question to, and please, no more than 1 minute for the question. And they will take note. We'll take 3 questions. After that, then they will respond.
Let me look for my papers there.
Okay, we have one here.
Sorry. Take this one.
Well, I thank you all, but my question was going to Sister Anne, who is not here, but if she can answer. I wanted to know more about this leading of theological debates at Wells in Palestine, and see how best to understand the leading of theological debates, like the woman at the well and Jesus. That is why what I was mostly interested in. Just a little development about it. And then, of course, the challenge of the bodiliness. I don't know how it works in men, but this is a challenge you may not have an answer for, but I'm just expressing what I heard. Thank you.
The one here.
Thank you. A question for Father Folifack, Aurélien. You say that you prefer emails than WhatsApp, Messenger, and these are the Facebook. But when you explain the process, you talked about the accompaniment. Yes. Do you do it by email or for this particular method, you use the WhatsApp and Messenger? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all. The moderator will excuse me. It's very difficult to ask a direct question to the PNL thing. I have to build a bit. There is a fundamental difference between spiritual exercises and the NLP. In the what we call the ultimate goal. In the spiritual exercises, the aim is union with God. And there is a dimension of a mystery. You are known. You are seeking. When we move to the NLP, the focus is on personal development, communication efficiency, and emotional management. So my point is, PNL in French, NLP is just it's just a methodology. You cannot equate spiritual exercises, which is a all, with a methodology that is, of course, can be useful to the delivery of spiritual exercises. The way you present it as if there's somewhere you can compare them, they can equate somehow. For me, it's a bit misleading. So let's put everything at its place. Spiritual exercises is all. This is just one of the methodology. You cannot use them because the exercises existed before the NLP that came into play in the 70s, as you said it.
Okay, so we'll take the first responses before we proceed.
Yes, I think since it's a matter of time to explain what was going on. I mean, normally the running of the retreats, we use email to send point of meditation, conferences, announcement, and everything. But for the accompaniment, normally it's through also emails. You write and describe your experience, and then the director or the accompagnator respond. But the door is open and it's free to use phone call, video call also. Some do, but it depends on the accompagnator. If it's free, if you have time, and that possibility is open. Yes, but it's not said it like that, but it depends on people and on demands. If you ask, request for it, and then.
Thank you for the question. But if maybe I didn't explain enough well, I didn't say that we equate LNP with spiritual exercise. I said that a PNL well understood is a good preparation to spiritual exercises because with PNL we are at the human level. But a good preparation to know a human person well. But this prepares us to open more to God. But if you examine well what the PNL talk about, the human resources in PNL are the gift of God. That's why I compare what Ignatius have done with his capacity to open up to his contemporary time. This is what I was trying to do. I didn't say a spiritual exercise equate LNPs. It was not the point at all here. But there are complementary elements, and one can prepare better for the spiritual exercises. This was my purpose and what I demonstrated.
Thank you. So we'll wait for a feedback from Dr. Anna for the other question.
Thank you for the wonderful presentations. Father Folifack, are you out to bankrupt the spiritual centers? Yes, if you are, and can all the directors be attached to one spiritual center? That you are working online, but you belong to a spiritual center.
Okay. Any other question? Sorry.
My simple goes to Annemarie. You said you trained people, but what are their backgrounds, especially when it comes to the issue of theology? And do you just take anyone who comes and register, or they must have some kind of background in the faith?
Thank you for the good presentations. My question goes to Father Aurélien and Sister Annemarie. And probably in connection to the presentations of yesterday, I hear preparing people for spiritual exercises, trainers, and not those who are to get into this spiritual exercise, or maybe I didn't get it right. And the reason as to why I'm asking is based on my own personal experience and also experiences of those who do not have Ignatian spirituality background and maybe having interest in going through spiritual exercises, or if they are aware, they may develop that interest. And I'm basing this on my first initial encounter when I asked one of the Jesuits, I needed the Constitution because I was doing my research and I just realized that the Jesuits introduced temporary profession and they don't profess the temporary vows. So I wanted to find out what is in the Constitution. And Father told me, for you to understand Jesuit Constitution, you need to go through spiritual exercises. Being a teacher, what came to my mind first was, in which school do you take these exercises? Because in my thinking, exercises, assignment. Father told me, no, you need to go through 30 days retreat. I said, 30 days? That phrase does not exist in the Franciscan vocabulary. So is there an alternative? He said, okay, you can take 8 days. And I went for 8 days retreat. Now, Jesuits are experts in innovation, even in words, you know. So I hear words like desolation, consolation. Okay, these are familiar words to me. So I think in terms of what I know. But later on, I came to realize that it has a deeper meaning, not just the simple consolation, the simple desolation vocabulary that I have. So I went through 8 days retreat, but I don't think in that first 8 days retreat, I got it right. But after that, I got the Constitution and got the information that I needed. But then I went now to do my own personal research on these spiritual exercises, at least to get a bit. So when I went for my second retreat, again directed, I was now able to get into it. And so that's why I'm asking. And then there are also those who are in the similar situation as myself. When you tell them about the directed retreat, especially spiritual exercises, what they will say is, you know, that kind of retreat, the director just listens to you and takes your information. And is not giving you anything. So it's only giving you readings to go and read, come and share. So is there a way that this exposure can be given to those who have not even shown interested in getting through these kind of spiritual exercises, so that when they get into it, they have some idea? Thank you.
So we'll take one more or two because of time. Is there another person here? Is there another person there? Any other question? I'll just take his.
Thank you very much. I had two questions. The first goes to Father Folifack. In this era of social media, and I am glad Jean-Luc asked the question that you are taking away many people. How do you actually assure the confidentiality with these communications on social media? And even that your own retreatant may actually also share. So it's not only just only you. Your own retreatants may spread whatever you have said elsewhere. Is there a professionalism, that a boundary that you put? That's my first question. And attached to this, also you said that those doing the retreat have to fast. So it's not that I have anything against the fasting, but how do you draw a line between performance and presence, if you like, so that people don't just fast to perform, to please the director, rather than just a presence and a relationship with God? So putting it as a rule, I felt was too much. At the heart of the spiritual exercises, there is freedom. Yeah. The other question is what Father Minaku asked, so I will not go back. As I listened, I thought you are actually making a comparison. I was feeling itchy. So thank you very much.
Yeah, one So I can ask my own. Is out to Annemarie, because I've been struggling with this for the training program. So how long is enough for the training program? Either mid-term or long-term, or how did it come about, the length of time for certification? And then the cost, how do you deal with the cost of the whole program? Thank you. The mic is there, you can start.
Okay. So I began with the first question of Father Jean-Luc. Yes, I think the issue of money is behind, isn't it? Because I say our retreats are free, though some people want to pay, and some do send time to time offering after the retreat, but normally it's free, yes. It's said clearly that the retreat is free.